just as these approach, I just talk through staff and figure out some of the key highlights of things that we think your area would be interested in. So I got a few things from around our division to share with you today. The first one here is in the traffic signal area, just getting you the highlights that the RLE funding program, the applications are out now, due by the end of June. So if municipalities in your area are considering, time is getting close. More information available on Penndot's traffic signal portal. If you need any aspect or need to know anything about RLE, instead of putting the link, it's easier just to type Penndot traffic signal portal on Google to find it because the link is ridiculous. For the 22-23 Green Light Go Awards, the announcement will be coming out here in the next day or two, but I got the go ahead to share with you 70 municipalities, 37.8 million. 16 of them will be in the SPC regions. You should see that coming as a governor's announcement here in the next few days. So this is your sneak peek at what's coming out for Green Light Go. And along with that, I know we're going to try to tweak the timeline for next year because folks are not sure if they got a Green Light Go award, so they don't know whether to put in for an early application. So we're hoping next year to do Green Light Go at the beginning of June. That way it's much clearer for folks to know if they should go ahead and put an early award in. So we recognize that's a challenge this year, trying to make sure that we give folks enough time to actually spend the money. We're making the timelines better, but we ended up having this conflict with RLE. So we'll fix that for next year. Another project here in the traffic area is an update of the traffic calming manual that was developed many years ago by me as Pubs 383. And it's been revised a few times over the years, and now it's going to be a new chapter in Design Manual Part 2. And we did a lot of outreach with folks in Philly and Pittsburgh in the early phases of the effort. And the pandemic put a halt to a lot of things, and we had to adjust course. We're now getting this back up and running, and the chapter is under review by the Design Manual 2 review team. So at this point, we're looking at a clearance transmittal will be sent out in August, and we'll be doing a webinar so the folks that are doing the reviews of clearance transmittal can get a once-over opportunity to ask questions, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
As a note here, there's a lot of info on the slides, more than I normally would do. Josh has a copy of this, so if anybody wants this, there's some links and such in here that if you want to be able to direct link to some of the things I'm talking about, you'll be able to get it from the PowerPoint. So if you want the detail and more info on the PowerPoint, just ask Josh for it after. Moving on to another effort underway is an update of policy for mid-block and trail crossings. So basically, we're trying to get a policy that can be incorporated into our traffic engineering manual, Pub 46, to do a better job of standardizing how we handle these types of situations, where they should be located, the types of countermeasures and that type of thing. So this effort is underway as well. And this is going to provide guidance for both state and local roads and all different aspects of it to help folks just better understand how to deal with it. Because we have questions coming quite frequently on how to handle different types of trail mid-block crossings. So we knew it was about time to come up with better guidance than what's available today. So we've done some review by internal staff, and it'll be reviewed by PPAC, all in anticipation of a clearance transmittal on this one coming out in July. Then I'm sure you're well aware of the things that COVID did for the use of the right-of-way. It changed a lot of things, and we had to come up with a process of how to deal with the non-transportation use as we were recovering from COVID. A lot of it was seating for restaurants and things of that nature. Well, we learned a lot in the process. Federal highway guidance on fair market value when we're trying to do things that don't have a transportation purpose. we've been successful on a number of situations, getting a case-by-case exception from federal highways for what's in the quote here on one of the bullets of social, environmental, economic purposes. So for, more or less doing street closures for restaurant dining and things of that nature, that they require fair market value unless we can get that FHWA exception. And the Transportation Advisory Committee has an effort underway that was started from feedback that they got from municipalities on looking at alternate uses of Penndot right away. We've been working closely with them. We've seen various versions of the draft paper. The draft paper includes recommendations for what they think both Penndot and municipalities should do. So we want to update the guidance that we developed in 2020 on how to handle these types of situations, but we need this document to be finalized to incorporate whatever comes out of this into our updated guidance. So expect to see more on this subject here in the coming months as this effort from the TAP study is completed. Another thing that sort of spurs off of this is the idea of tactical urbanism. The Pittsburgh region, you folks are probably familiar with this term, but it's taking various types of concepts and using low-cost materials to do more or less a proof of concept, to put something out there for people to be able to see and drive through or what have you, to actually get a look and feel of a concept before something's put in on a permanent application. And then there are a number of different things that fall in line with those types of applications, and there's some challenges with it occurring today. We don't have a resource in place for how to handle it. Documents from other locations might not necessarily apply to Pennsylvania, and things of that nature. One of the big ones from my perspective over time has always been we need to make sure there's a long-term viable application. There's not much sense of doing a short-term tactical urbanism concept if people love it and want to do it, and there's no long-term version to do it once the short test is over. So lots of different aspects of that, and our planning and research right now is working with Pitt to try to develop a guideline for municipalities on this concept. So again, we recognize the desire and the need from the locals to get involved and do more of these types of applications, and our planning folks are trying to help come up with some. Moving into our operational area, our team has done a lot in recent years to really dive into details on performance, understanding what's going on the roadway so we can identify better projects. Our traffic management centers can become more efficient. This is a look at the congestion pie chart that our team had developed, looking specifically at the SPC region. And with the congestion pie charts that are available, the folks using the information, you can dive into whatever level of detail you want to see to a specific road, specific time frame, specific region, you name it, you can dive in and see the details. There's a link on here that you can get at. You need a CWAPA access to be able to get in there, but if you have that, you can get in and look at this stuff in much greater detail and really break down and understand what's going on. I think that's something that can really help you frame understanding what some of the challenges are that you're facing. I thought this was an interesting diagram. We all knew 2019 to 2020, the drop in traffic was dramatic. Nobody was doing anything. Well, in 2020 to 21, traffic is not quite back to normal, but we're at about 95+%. It was higher than that. We were on a trend to be almost back to 100%, and then gas prices got ridiculous and it settled back down, and we've been hovering around 95% of traffic volumes. but congestion has not resurfaced like it was pre-COVID. So, we're at approximately in the SPC region, 42% lower congestion. It's about 38 to 40 across the state in its entirety with 95% of the traffic volume. So that tells you, that last 5% of traffic volumes is really where we start pushing the threshold of maxing out the road's capability and start forming a lot more of our congestion. So there's quite a bit less congestion now than we had pre-pandemic, with 95% of the traffic volumes back in place. Another tool that the team has developed recently is a congestion calendar. 2020 is obviously kind of useless because not a lot of volumes, not a lot of congestion. We're trying to finalize the 21 information for the information that can be used for the application. And there's a link in here, again, if you want to explore more and understand it, but it gives folks an opportunity to look day by day to see, are there things that you might miss, some type of street fair that's on the second Tuesday of every April, that kind of thing that you find out is causing congestion that you might not have necessarily planned for or thought through. So we think it's a useful tool that you might find helpful in some of the activities you do, so I included a link to that as well. Now, this is a chart that is basically taking a look at when there is an incident in the back of the queue. What was causing the queue in the first place? You'll see in Allegheny County and the rest of SPC outside of Allegheny County, what is basically the cause of your queue when you have backlog crashes. The first could be just a crash itself, or it could be recurring congestion. But what stands out to me when I look at these charts is in recurring congestion, that's something that we often think could lead to a secondary crash in the back, but a lot of people know when they're in slow areas where recurring congestion has occurred, and that number is much lower at 3% versus 16% caused from an initial crash to start with. When there's an initial crash, you're probably at a time of day in a spot where you're not necessarily prepared for a queue, and the people in the back of the queue are much less prepared. So again, just some information to help paint a picture as you're looking to identify what are the types of things that you want to do in your region to try to solve specific types of problems. We have some information on instant clearance times for the SPC region. This gives you a look at the amount of minutes on average for all the core network by county. Some of the counties are on average, and again, it might be because the core network are all the major roadways, and on the major roadways, the incidents that are occurring and being reported are just that significant. But you can get a look here at where we have greater challenges in trying to resolve incidents in a timely manner on both the core road network and on our interstates in these specific counties. So moving on here to highway safety, a few highlights, talking about a number of grants and the awards that were given out in the SPC region. Enforcement grants, 1.1 million, that reached, as it broke down from the overall into 160 different police departments for a number of different things that you could see there. 2 educational outreach grants out to 7 of the counties to cover a wide range of things as well. So contact information on here to if there's questions or if you need more information about the grant program specifically. Then hitting a hot topic that I know you folks are well aware of, have had conversations on, the not meeting federal performance measures triggers obligation requirements of us making sure that we have HSIP dollars obligated. This year, that's $106 million that we need to have obligated, and right now we're at about 51%. So we have a long way to go to make sure that we get our HSIP projects obligated. I did a little snip there at the bottom to show where SPC stands. Available amount of money is $8.5 million, with only 2.5 obligated at this point in time. So we're still have the ability to obligate 16 million in the SPC region for safety projects using the HSIP dollars. And over the years, we hear, some folks have good success with HSIP, others struggle to find and get their projects approved. Our team has done a lot to try to build tools to help folks identify and pick good safety projects with a high rate of return on investment. And it's that issue that often causes the dilemma when people are looking to do projects where there's a less than 1-to-1 return on investment. Well, there's limited dollars. We're trying to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. We're not in the market for choosing projects with a less than 1-to-1 return on investment. So, just a couple of highlights. And again, I don't think this is anything that folks aren't aware of, but we're gonna talk about this more and more frequently until we can get to the point where we have higher than 1-to-1 return on investments. Our obligation requirements are met. We have good projects identified, and we're able to continue moving forward. So I think it's worth bringing this up. So we've done network screening on both intersections and segments of roads. I think the number's over 20,000 segments and intersections now that have been done through network screening. And the mapping basically will show you different color codes as to whether or not there's an excess cost associated with an area. So picking a stretch of road where you have a red, an orange, or a yellow, you have an excess cost where a safety project is potentially warranted. From the SPC region, you can see at the bottom 522 intersections, 376 segments. So there's a wide range of locations that if we choose projects at these locations, figure out what the true need is, we can solve a problem. There's spreadsheets that are associated with this that you can look at it in priority order and just start from the top down and so on, and really figure out where the biggest bang for the buck will be, where you'll get the return on investment for each $6. For the top segment and the top intersection in each county, a prioritized summary is developed to give some ideas of potential considerations. Again, all to help with the planning process to make this easier for you folks to pick and choose good projects where we can really start trying to tackle that fatality and serious injury number. The team now is starting to work on collision diagrams for top 5 to 6 locations in each county that'll supply you with some additional information as well. So that's my highlight. I'm happy to answer anything anybody wants to ask.
Yeah, thank you, Doug, so much. I appreciate the update from the state. And actually, going back to your previous slide there, I didn't know those prioritization sheets were coming, and when we requested it, our Hsm layers from central office that came with those, and we thought those were great assets to potentially going after some federal safety funds. So we appreciate that. Are there any questions for Doug? Please feel free to unmute and ask.
Yeah, this is Sarah Walford. I put a question for Doug in the chat box, but
I can't see it, Sarah. I can't even figure out where the box is at this point.
No, that's fine. It goes back to questions we've had as part of the freight work group, and that is, right now the statewide safety plan seems to have a circular reference when it comes to trucking and freight, which is a deferral to the guidelines in the other document in terms of determining freight safety projects and need. Are you following my comments here?
I'm following your comments, but the freight aspect of things largely comes out of another area, so I might not be familiar enough to answer what you're getting at.
But no, and that's exactly my question, which is if we identify freight safety needs, as in truck incidents on our roadways, it's not technically part of the statewide HSIP document then, or the safety plan. So I'm just trying to figure out if there's a better way when we're in a position, and I know some other MPOs in the state are, to start tackling areas where truck incidents are prevalent or more prevalent perhaps. Excuse me. But in order for us to spend our safety money, it has to be in line with the state plan.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, Sarah, you're basically saying that you're identifying freight safety needs in areas where there are freight incidents and things of that nature, that you would like to do HSIP type of projects, but as of today, those projects aren't showing up because they're freight related. Is that what you're asking? And how to get those to be something where HSIP can apply to it?
Yes, generally. So the breakdown seems to be that it's not consistent with what's in the statewide safety plan because of that weird circular reference to the commercial service vehicle plan that is done by, I think, the state police. And we're not doing it now. It's not holding up anything now. But as we start putting together a freight improvement project, it would be a tool that we could use. And when you talk about having, $18 million available that's unspent at this time, not that we'll have any problem spending it. If we could make that connection clearer somehow, it might facilitate some new types of projects.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take that back and discuss it with folks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Any other questions for Doug?
Hey, Doug, this is Glenn. I'm going to put in the chat. There is a new video that was just developed on explaining the network screening. It is very useful and kind of gives a great description of how that tool can be used to help reduce crashes. So I'll just throw that in the chat.
That's good, Glenn. I didn't even think of that, or I would have included that on there, the link to it. I watched it twice. I mean, there's a lot in there, but it's not slow and boring. It's about 20 minutes, and it does do, I agree with Glenn, a good job of helping folks understand what network screening is all about.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Glenn. Any other questions for Doug?
All right, folks, and Josh has a copy of the PowerPoint here. If anybody would like to get it more detailed, just touch base with him.
Absolutely. Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it.
You might have to stop me. You might have to stop my screen because I'm not even sure how to do it at this point.
That's right. I think the next person, Dale and Bob, will be able to share theirs right over top here. So with that being said, we'll turn it over to Bob Taylor and Dale Whitmer with the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission to give a overview on the Pennsylvania Turnpike's fiber optic network project and an update on how that project is going. So Bob or Dale, whichever one, I'll turn it over to you guys. Thanks.
Yeah, Josh, I'll start, and thanks for inviting us to give an update to this group. It's nice to be back with this group. I was really hoping when you talked about doing this presentation, the Penguins would still be in the Stanley Cup playoffs and I could be there in person, but that didn't happen. And I heard the Marriott's closing, by the way, across the street as well.
Yes, it is. It's closed right now. Yep.
So that's unfortunate, but definitely glad to be back with this group. And going back to Doug's presentation, the conversation with Doug several years ago, I remember him talking about the congestion pie charts, and that Federal Highways pie chart was based on what Doug 1960s data, and Doug's like, there's got to be a way we can do this for Pennsylvania, and we can do it by county. And it's cool to see that Doug has done that, and that we're using that to really target congestion, specifically to a county and to an area. So that's really cool to see. But enough about that. I just wanted to give an update on our fiber project. This journey, it seems like it's been going on for a lifetime, but with the pandemic, it's only been really since 2016 when we really got into this initiative. This has been like a movie. There's been some emotional roller coasters, some ups and downs, and but I would say if I could summarize this whole initiative in three words, I would say commitment. We made the commitment to do this because it's better for us long term. It will be a return on the investment. It will save us money in lease lines. It will help us serve the underserved. So there's so many good reasons to be doing this. Teamwork, IT, working with engineering, working with finance, working with legal, working with all our partners. There's been really great teamwork on this and adaptability, and I'll get into that in a second. Really staying the course, even when the course has to be adjusted somewhat. We've pivoted a couple times, and even as of yesterday, we're gonna need to pivot a bit more. So I'll get into that as well too. So, Dell, if you can just kind of jump to slide 4 or 5, I think it is 4. Again, sort of background on this, and then I'll kind of give a little bit about the goals. But really, this started in 2016. We went to the P3 board for approval to do a P3. We started down that process. We were pursuing really formal design, build, operate, maintain, and commercialize P3s. We ultimately got very close to that finish line, and what we found was really, our desire as an organization was to really, the money we were willing to put in to do the P3s was really about the savings we would generate from lease lines. So really what we found at the very end was the proposals weren't financially feasible to us. And really what was happening in this industry, it's kind of unique. Think of it like building a condo, and think of 2 units out of 40 units are booked. Somebody's put a deposit down on those. So really what the industry was telling us, really they can only guarantee that commercial revenue. Even though that they know the other 30 condos would eventually sell, they could not bring that revenue to the table in the P3 proposal. So ultimately, we weren't seeing from them the ability to really monetize the network like we knew we could, and like they knew we could. So ultimately, we made the decision to walk away from that. And that was a tough decision, but it was the right decision, because ultimately, again, we didn't want to put more money into this than we were going to actually save. So we then pivoted really to a combination of design builds, really 2 that should be complete this year. We have an eastern section really from Harrisburg to New Jersey, and then another section covering our northeast extension. And we'll get into the challenges with those, but those are on track to really be ready to go this year. And there's definitely some lessons learned. Obviously we're dealing with supply chain challenges right now. We were fortunate to get that fiber ordered ahead of time. We were fortunate to really get all our Cisco gear that we needed ordered early. Really, one of the biggest supply chain challenges on those 2 sections, which are impacting other sections as well, is the fast patch. And Dell will go into, while that doesn't seem like something that should be impacted by the supply chain challenges, it was something that happened due to a hurricane down in the New Orleans area a while back that really impeded that production of that fast patch that we need. So we did that. We put out our first section in the west to bid, section 3 really from Harrisburg to WRO. Yesterday we did not receive any bids. So well, that seems dire. Again, we're going to be adaptable. We're going to pivot. We do have an option to build that as part of the OMC contract, or we're looking at breaking the western sections into smaller chunks. We're still doing a bit of an after action of why we didn't get any bidders, but obviously everything going on in the world, supply chain challenges, those types of things. It's a very tough project to bid on. Also, the investment into broadband initiatives nationally are really putting a lot of demand on resources, but also the contractors who can do this work. So just to kind of backtrack a little bit, and why are we doing this? So I mentioned really our lease lines and what we have out there. So really we're focused on what we have now, and I know Mike Pack's on, and he could talk probably more about the ITS program overall. But we actually have thousands of IoT devices, not just ITS. We have facility systems, we HVAC systems, maintenance systems out there. So we have thousands of devices out there, and each require communication. So that communication, those lease lines are significant cost. So that's one of the reasons we want to do it. Obviously, we're all preparing for the future. There's definitely some known unknowns, as we call them, things with like connected vehicles, other technologies we know we want to do in the future, and then really preparing for the unknown. So again, this is a 25-year term. We know there's a lot of transformation happening right now, so we need to have additional capacity to serve that as well too. The other thing is, really moving our own network off of microwave system, connecting our 50 plus facilities, and not relying on lease lines and microwave network systems for that as well too. So lastly, we really want to get out of the tower business. So as we move our microwave network off the towers, we're also starting to transition from a VHF radio system to FirstNet. So ultimately, we want to really commercialize our towers and really get out of the tower business and having to utilize those towers. So how many strands of fiber do we put in? And this was sort of a interesting discussion. So we try to calculate what we know is coming in the future and what we don't know. So I think we initially calculated, and Mark Meadow can correct me, but I think it was like 48 to 96 strands of fiber we thought we were needed. Then we had a conversation with some other projects going on, most notably the Route 33 corridor in Ohio. And I think they were putting 432 strands in. Ultimately, we decided, if we're building this network, we're going to make sure we have enough capacity for the future. So we're putting two sets of 288 strands of fiber in. So we know that will give us plenty of capacity for the future, but also give us some capacity to commercialize that network as well too. So, and then I mentioned the underserved piece of this. Again, part of this was to do our part to help everyone serve the underserved areas. I know SPC has been really a leader in trying to address this issue. And there's really two parts of the problem. There's sort of the underserved urban situation and the underserved rural situation. And they're underserved for two different reasons, really. But if you look at, really the rural areas, it's really about a lack of a network. So we feel like we're providing the pipe for the telecommunications industry to really serve those areas that don't have good broadband access now. So that's a little bit about the why. I think Dale has up a map showing the different sections. Again, the east and northeast sections are under construction right now, scheduled to be complete this year. And then really with the section in red was the section that we did not receive bids on yesterday. And again, we're going to pivot and do something else there. And then we're optimistic that we'll really get the 4 section built by 2026 as well too. So the west, the goal in the west is really by 2026, and that's somewhat driven by our open road tolling initiative. We rather than have lease lines where we have those open road tolling sites, we want to have fiber in place there as well too. So next slide. So this is kind of the part where I'll transition to Dell and he'll correct everything I said wrong. But really the bids on the eastern section it was around $110 million. Our estimate, and that estimate on the west changes daily with all the inflationary issues going on. The estimate for the Western network was $234 million, although as of today, we think that's low. So we're continuing to adjust that. We're continuing to look at the supply chain issues. We heard from Cisco again yesterday that optical networking gear it's a 12-month backlog to get gear. So we're seeing some things in the IT space that are taking 36 months to get the equipment. So it's a real issue for us as well too. Next slide. It's all yours, Dale.
Okay, great. Well, Bob already covered much of the reasons why the network. And so, I'd like to just go over some of the details. We talked about the OIT devices, a number of devices that are out there that are currently on a variety of networks. And so this is kind of a summary of the types of devices that are out there now and the need to connect them. We have all electronic tolling, which is well underway with the gantry. So we're going from the toll plaza based systems to the gantry based systems that are in between interchanges. And so as you can imagine, that involves data with regard to license plates and video for every car at every gantry, as opposed to just entrance and exits. So there's a whole lot more data that needs to be pushed through. And the existing microwave system with towers has limitations on, and so the fiber will address that issue. The overall, the commission has undertaken the Connected and Automated Vehicle Program Roadmap, and this provides a summary of the types of applications that are under consideration, and looking at what is kind of the short-term and long-term advances, what will be needed, and overall, just to summarize the logic behind it is, with regard to fiber, is that fiber is the kind of the common medium that has not changed substantially, and has, in terms of its abilities, and what really has changed is the devices you put on either end of it. So if you look back 20 years, fiber has a life expectancy, and most importantly, from a technology standpoint, it is a solid platform to build on with changing technology. So, another point in this is that with the fiber optics within the right of way, the one advantage is there's points to access new devices every 2,400 feet. There's a junction box, and part of that is in place to really plan for what's unknown, and with regard to new devices that would benefit the connected and automated vehicle infrastructure. So there's a very significant part of the use case is planning for the unknowns, and understanding the value that fiber has with regard to planning for future technology. Bob mentioned the current backhaul system, and this is really what we're looking to replace, is that communications for the commission, not only with toll data, but data between the buildings and other communications. Go through a series of towers that both have redundancy across the whole Commonwealth, and so by putting fiber optics in place, we will still have redundancy on the endpoints, but that will be put in place, and will be much more streamlined with the implementation of fiber. And there's also discussions between the Turnpike and Penndot with regard to Penndot's expanding fiber optic network, to look at ways that we can share with regard to backhaul and communications. So another aspect of this is, in addition to building the fiber optics and needing the fiber optics, is the commercialization, operations and maintenance, and commercialization needed for the system. So we all know with any infrastructure, we need to have the operations and maintenance, and with technology and any infrastructure, that's incredibly important. And with the Turnpike's infrastructure, both in terms of its right of way, it's a narrow right of way, as you all know. It's about 220 feet average on the original right of way. And so there's a whole lot of limitations with regard to where the fiber can go, as well as the number of moves that need to be undertaken to undertake projects. So there's, with any total reconstruction project, we need to move fiber out onto aerials, and then also move the fiber back into the project after the conduits are installed. And so that requires one entity. And because this is commercialized, as Bob covered on the previous slide that showed the number of strands of fiber, the commercialization fiber has 288 counts, as well as 3 empty ducts for the commercialization entity. So we've viewed that as a way to assist with the operations and maintenance costs, as well as with regard to generating revenue. And so this was assembled as one contract for operations, maintenance, and commercialization, and plenary broadband infrastructure was awarded the contract. They were, and so that's a 25-year term and includes the O&M services as well as commercialization. The commercialization of the Eastern Network, which is under construction to be completed by the end of this year. That is part of the commercialization. We're currently negotiating terms for the Western Network. And so that is something that also provides a benefit because the commercialization entity and the Turnpike both have an interest in protecting the lines as well as helping each other organization succeed. So there's a revenue share that's part of this, and it's a mutually beneficial arrangement. So the type of services, and we mentioned there's empty ducts. Plenary is able to offer dark fiber services, meaning someone may lease one or two strands of fiber. They can also provide lit services. And they also have the ability to commercialize cell phone or cell tower as for new towers that they would build, as well as market backhaul to existing towers that are in place. So there are significant commercialization potentials here, and even that is changing. And so each year, Plenary comes back in and provides a revised commercialization plan, and they at the same time are locked into a minimum guaranteed revenue, which was the basis of the bid. So the benefits from a commercial side is it is a unique asset. It's underground. It's a diverse route, direct route, and a catalyst for economic development. Similar to building an interchange, if you have a direct connection to backhaul fiber, to long haul fiber, then there's opportunities for economic development. And in many of the areas that the Turnpike passes, there are really no options. And so that's always been an issue for communications. Trying to determine, even for the Turnpike's needs for ITS devices, trying to find the closest fiber in some areas is non-existent. So by installing fiber in the Turnpike's right away, it benefits the communities adjacent to the Turnpike. And also, if there is fiber available, provides additional competition, which is beneficial as well. So this is a map showing the long haul fiber commercial routes. And the Turnpike is running right through this rural area that currently does not have the backhaul. So it's not to say that all of that area is unserved. But this providing close proximity is an advantage to the local area, as well as providing a direct route, which is an advantage and is viewed as a commercial advantage for this line. So, looking at that unique path, it's benefiting some of the rural areas, and that does open up opportunities. And so the Turnpike it views this project as being beneficial, and also views Plenary as the entity that would work with other providers to extend fiber to rural areas in need. So the Turnpike will not does not view that as its responsibility, and views it as something that is a benefit of the project and a good reason to do the project. But in terms of actual, spending money to extend to rural areas, that's best left to the entities who are better prepared to do that, which is the commercial entities and the counties that are pursuing broadband funding. So this is an example of areas in need where the SPC and under a separate study that Michael Baker is assisting a region in, identifying areas that are in need and mapping those out and doing accurate ground truthing to make certain that areas that are in need are prioritized for funding. And what was found is that the FCC mapping was highly inaccurate and needed that ground truthing. And so a map like this on the right shows some areas that previously were not shown as being in need, and conversely areas that are not in need, the green areas and so forth. Some of those were showing up in FCC mapping as needing fiber, or needing broadband. So we look at this at close proximity to these red areas, and literally the fiber can be extended through the right-of-way fence into areas in need, and at an affordability rate, even for the commercial carriers to extend that didn't previously exist. And another benefit is having fixed broadband services on towers that can be mounted even on the turnpike right away, but benefiting local underserved areas. So I'm going to skip through a couple of these because I know we're trying to keep this brief, but we talked about the infrastructure. Junction boxes are in the shoulder. We have micro trenching in the shoulder. We have connections to the various demarcation sites. This shows kind of the redundant path so that we're certain that that at these main hub locations, and this is a maintenance facility, that we have redundant paths and no one backhoe can take out the fiber line for the commercial, for the turnpike's use. And in instances like this, the commercial line continues through the right of way, and the demarcation site is served by lateral lines. This is kind of a plan view looking down on where the fiber is being installed. So it's generally offset at least 5 feet from the edge of pavement, and the junction boxes are placed in the shoulder, and this provides greater protection rather than the junction boxes being placed behind guide rails and having fiber being hit by guide rails that have been replaced, and that has been a significant problem for the turnpike in the past. So we're trying to apply those types of lessons learned. This shows both a plan view and then on the right, the micro trench. So the trench that is shown on the right shows the conduit, a bundle of 8 at the bottom with it's an 18-inch deep trench, and shows the cover that would be placed over it using fast patch as a reinstatement material, which is very durable and is also, as Bob mentioned, created some supply chain issues on the first 2 contracts, and so we're looking at that. So this shows the construction methods, installing a trench, shows a placement of the microduct, and reinstatement with, in this case, a fast patch is being installed in to seal it. So a view of the type of junction boxes that are put in place, and attachments to, sorry about that, attachments to bridges. I think another lesson learned is some of the ducts that are inside the bridges were designed for electrical cable and not fiber optic cable. And so in some instances, there's need to have attachments rather than use the existing ducts within some of the structures. And borings were a significant part of this to go under the turnpike to reach sites. Get aerial fiber that is placed, aerial fiber is placed in areas where construction is planned within 5 years for total reconstruction, so that we're not putting it in the shoulder and then moving it as part of the total reconstruction project. So I think overall, this is kind of to wrap up, what we're doing is really demonstrates it's going to benefit the operations and infrastructure for the commission, and making that transition from towers to fiber optics, as well as providing more opportunities for both known and unknown infrastructure that will be needed. We know data is a huge part of what will be needed in the future. We know that devices will be needed at locations that are not as predictable, and that we have the backbone to serve them. We have, with the operations, maintenance, and commercialization contract that is separate, secured a source of non-toll revenue. And it's a commercial asset, so that works in both ways. It benefits the entity that's commercializing the fiber, but it also benefits the community, as well as not just residents, but economic development assets. And when there's economic development, then there's typically more trips on the turnpike, so benefiting both commercial sides of the deal and the community benefit. So that's, in summary, the project, and I think we've taken a little bit longer than 20 minutes. As you can see, there's a whole lot to cover, and we're really appreciate the opportunity to provide you with this briefing. So at this point, we'll turn to questions.
Yeah, thanks, Dale and Bob. Really appreciate your presentation this morning. I found this, to really tie into what we're trying to accomplish here at SPC with, our broadband access study and how we incorporate broadband for the rest of our counties, especially the rural areas. Does anyone have any questions? I know Mike Mastaglio has a question. If you want to go ahead and unmute, Mike, you could ask your question.
Thanks. Dale, I was just wondering if you could re-explain why the fiber doesn't work well inside the existing duct banks in the deck versus putting it on the outside.
Sure. There are some duct banks that carry it perfectly fine, but there were some bridges where the bend radius is just too sharp, and so that was one of the areas where it was problematic, and so I think that's kind of that was the point I was trying to make with regard to in certain instances not working.
Thanks. That makes sense.
Jason Theakston, did you have a question?
Yeah, really quick. On the mapping, I wasn't sure if it was delineated or not. The Montfayette Expressway that runs through Washington County, is this conduit already existing there, or is there plans to install that along that roadway? I know a lot of the areas in the Mon Valley that runs through would probably benefit from a fiber optic, connection there.
Sure. So in the Montfayette Expressway, that is the fifth phase, and so we are evaluating that. We have some fiber optics in place in segments for the commission's use that has 4 conduits in place, and so and at the same time it's not physically connected to the main line yet, and so it's being viewed as the main focus will be to install the fiber optics and conduit in a similar manner in the gaps where we don't currently have it, and then determine how we can work within the existing ducts where the ducts exist. But then there are commercialization opportunities that we would view as being, if there is, even though it's not connected to the main line, we are looking at, would there be opportunities to extend, from a main point of access down Montfayette Expressway in a commercial segment. So that is also on the table. So I'd say at this point, because it's not all physically connected, even within the segments that are turnpike owned, that would be the first priority, and then looking at ways to commercialize within the right of way there.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Any other questions for Dale or Bob? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is the Smart Loading Zone City of Pittsburgh pilot program. And for that, I'll turn it over to Anil Merchant, who is the head of product for Automotive. So Anil, go ahead. Thanks for joining us.
Great, thanks for having us. So my name is Anil Merchant. As mentioned, I'm the head of product at Automotus. We work with cities and airports to help manage and optimize on-street curb parking. And I was asked to briefly chat a bit about our recent launch in Pittsburgh with the Smart Loading Zones program. That was in conjunction with both DOMI and the PPA. So first, just a little bit about the why. So we found that with the rise in support in commercial vehicle activity, particularly in e-commerce and food delivery, existing infrastructure isn't suited to support the rise. And so this yields double parking increases, other safety related hazards. And the expectation is that this trend will continue north through 2030. And so there needs to be some change in the way that the commercial vehicles are managed. And so what we do is we leverage camera vision to offer a suite of curb management solutions. And this manifests itself in the form of smart loading zones. It consists of three high-level components. The first is data. And so we collect data, we analyze that data, and we surface up insights. And this yields things like which areas have the highest level of double parks, which levels have the highest parking turnover, which zones have the highest dwell times, and by whom, right? By what modality, whether it's freight trucks, delivery vans, passenger vehicles, etc. We then use that data to figure out where to place these zones and then put the appropriate policy in place. And usually that manifests in the form of pricing. And so we automate curb payments. We work with the city, we work with the relevant organizations to figure out the right price structure to meet the KPIs that have been set, whether it is to increase parking turnover, reduce double parks, in some cases, incentivize electric vehicles, and then implement that pricing structure. And we do this all in an automated fashion, which I'll get into a little bit here. And then finally, for those that aren't signing up for the program, we also have automated curb enforcement, wherein people who do parking in the zones that either haven't signed up or aren't meant to be parking in these zones will receive a citation of some sort. Now, we found that this has pretty incredible results. We've seen a 60% reduction in double parking, a 10% reduction in congestion, a large increase in parking related revenue, and a 25% increase in curbside parking turnover. This is a quick video of how our systems work. So as I mentioned, we have sensors mounted at street lights nearby the zones. We can detect license plates as well as logos of various vehicles. The green there shows a parked vehicle, red shows double parked vehicles, and blue just shows any object that's been detected, whether it's a vehicle or a pedestrian, or a bicycle or a scooter or whatever else. So a little bit about the timeline and how this manifested. Started last year in the planning phase, and we granted Pittsburgh, along with two other cities, a $100,000 grant that consisted of both hardware, software, and services to get the program up and going. Then began the project scoping and location selection, and again, that consisted of a variety of measures, some of which were which areas had the highest level of citations. Again, we focused on double parking events to help figure out where the problem areas were, which areas had the highest dwell time, particularly by freight trucks, and some other measures that we used to analyze what made sense as far as where these zones should be placed. A lot of this also consisted of working with the nearby business districts just to ensure that placing smart loading zones there would be beneficial to the local businesses. Also, last year, the DOE awarded a $4 million curb management grant to be used to help incentivize electric vehicle adoption. And I'll get into a little bit about that as well. This year, we launched the automated payment solution of the project. So we started with analysis last year, and on April 25th, we went live at the zones and actually turned on the ability for drivers to park and be billed automatically for their time spent at these zones. For the next year, we're going to expand. So we have 20 zones up and running today across the city. We are expanding to 100 zones next year. And as I mentioned, the purpose of the DOE grant is to incentivize zero emissions. And so some of these zones will be focused exclusively on zero emission vehicles only. And the way we do that is by incentivizing the pricing for zero emission vehicles for access to these zones. A little bit more about the smart loading zones. On the right there are the signage that goes up at each zone. There are two signs. One which is more policy focused, that gives the hours and days, and the other is just a way to register. And it's a rather simple process. We have a QR code up there. We also have a phone number that can be texted to receive a direct link. It's a one-time registration, and there isn't an app required. So the whole purpose is to use a web-based URL to input your information, essentially your name, your email address, your vehicle, and your credit card or payment source of choice, and fund your account so that thereon after, every time you access the zone, you are automatically billed for the time spent. It's rather similar to the Easy Pass program. As mentioned, only registered vehicles are permitted. Those that access the zones that are not registered receive a bill in the mail with an additional administrative fee. And on the bottom there is the rate structure. So we use a tiered rate structure. For 0 to 5 minutes, 7 cents a minute. The next 10 minutes is 14 cents a minute. And this is intentional to encourage turnover, right? So for vehicles that don't have to stay longer than they need to conduct a specific drop-off, the reason that there's an increase in rates is just to make these people aware that the longer you stay, the more you pay. This just shows a sampling of where some of the zones are. Again, they're distributed across the city and across various districts. Throughout this program, the analysis continues, and I'll show a quick slide here that shows some of the data that's been output in the early days here. And we continue to engage drivers, fleets, and local businesses for feedback. That's a really critical part of this program. And we have a rather open feedback cycle here just to collect, any concerns, any questions, and address them accordingly. And we are now starting to scout out the additional locations that we'll be expanding upon for phase 2 here. The account registration, a couple of screenshots here that are intended to show the process. Again, rather simple. You enter in some profile information, you add a payment source, and that's it. There's no need to download an app or log in again. Our cameras detect when the vehicle is out of zone and for how long, and will deduct from your payment source for that time spent, and will automatically charge the card when your payment source runs low, or we'll give you the option to refill your account. We have a fleets program for those fleets that choose to onboard with us. Again, a very simple process. We simply collect a list of all license plates associated with that fleet and input them into that system. A couple of early findings. So we've seen some really positive change in the past 2 months since we've been live, under 2 months actually. We've seen an increase in parking turnover across the zones and a decrease in the average park dwell time. And importantly, we've seen a decrease already in the number of double parks, as well as a slight increase in the double park duration. And that's something that we're very curious about. The important metric to us is the decrease in double parks. Now, for those that are double parking, we've seen a just under 4% increase in the time spent that they do double park. And on the right there is just some statistics on who is parking. So as you can see there, the vast majority are passenger vehicles, followed by freight trucks, delivery vans, and buses. So what's next? As I mentioned, for next year, we were planning on scaling up, leveraging the $4 million grant. And again, that was awarded to a group that included Automotives, CMU, and some others for 3 cities, Pittsburgh, Los Angeles, and Santa Monica. The goal there is to prioritize emission reduction. So we'll be looking into how the policy changes to help do just this, whether it's a change in the rate structure, a change in the priority to the zones, or something else that hasn't been discovered yet. And the goal continues to be to drive a reduction in double parking, safety hazards, and overall congestion. And on the right, there's a picture of our one of our cameras, actually, that are mounted at one of the zones in Pittsburgh. And with that, I'll open up for questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anil. We really appreciate your time in presenting on this. I found this when I learned about this project, this pilot program. I was fascinated with it, and I was thankful that you were able to join us this morning to give a presentation on it. So with that, I'll open it up to, are there any questions before we move on? Andrew, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I was just curious what type of feedback you've received from the public. I mean, nobody likes to receive parking fees, but have you run into any unique challenges or feedback?
So we get a lot of questions, and mostly around how the tiered rate structure works. That's been a bit of a new concept for people. I think generally the feedback has been pretty positive in having these zones available, whereas previously people may have had to double park because somebody else that wasn't actually doing business at the location was using the zone. And yeah, there's more questions around the how it's used versus the why.
Thank you.
Greg Tuchek with Pittsburgh Regional Transit. Good.
Hey there. I was wondering about double parking and if you use the cameras for enforcement at all. I'm thinking in particular, for example, about Highland between Penn and Center, where there's a whole bunch of folks who sit there on the east side of the street. There's no parking allowed, but they block a lane to get food from across the street, and it blocks our bus operations going northbound there.
Yeah, so in Pittsburgh, we currently don't have a dynamic enforcement integration. In some other cities, we do. In the city of Omaha, for example, where we're launching soon here, we do have live enforcement capabilities when our cameras detect a double parked vehicle. We're looking to integrate that with PPA, but at the moment, it doesn't exist. So what we are exploring in the meanwhile is to potentially bill people by mail for these kind of violations as well.
Cool, thank you.
Chris, go ahead.
Hey, I just had 2 questions. How big are these zones? And what about hybrid vehicles? You mentioned electric vehicles. What about hybrid vehicles? How do they play into this?
Got it. So the size of the zones vary anywhere from 1 space per zone, which can accommodate 1 vehicle, usually 1 delivery vehicle, to 4 spaces. So our cameras can detect up to roughly 60 linear feet in curb space, which can accommodate 3 to 4 vehicles. The Pittsburgh zones themselves, yeah, they're sort of all over the place. Some of them are just one space, others are 2 or 3 spaces. And as far as hybrid vehicles go, so our cameras do detect hybrid versus electric. The grant was issued specifically for reduction in emissions, and so obviously hybrid vehicles are a step in that direction. What the specific policy is and which vehicles will be incentivized is still being hashed out. At the moment, my best guess would be there'd be some incentive for hybrid vehicles, a greater incentive for purely electric vehicles.
Awesome. Hey, one other real quick thing. Is there curb striping associated with those zones?
There is, yeah. So we actually paint all curbs, all smart lighting zone curbs, purple.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Neil? All right, hearing none, thank you so much. We appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda, I guess we'll turn it over to myself and Andrew Thompson. We'll talk about our most recent regional roundabout study that we completed a couple months ago, and Andrew and I had the opportunity to present this in Baltimore at the May Site Mid-Colonial District annual meeting. So if you just want to go to the next slide there, Andrew. Just reintroduce myself, Joshua Spano with SPC here, and Andrew, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sorry about that, Josh. Still
Oh, you're
good.
good.
Still WebEx. And I'm Andrew Thompson. I've recently changed positions from urban engineers over to Killison Associates, but it was a great opportunity to work on this with Josh.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so you'll see the urban. So we worked with Mike Mostaglio and Andrew Thompson when Andrew was at Urban Engineers. Now he's with Kittleson, but we wanted to basically present the same thing we presented down in Baltimore. Went through the process of, and why roundabouts are an important tool here in our region. Next slide, Andrew. So really, when it comes down to it, we're the metropolitan planning organization. Everything really comes back to our long-range transportation plan, which is a smart moves for a changing region. And within that document, we identify policies and a world-class, safe, well-maintained integrated transportation system, and these policy goals of safety to reduce traffic fatalities as well as injuries on all public roadways. And really, a mindset and a goal within our long-range transportation plan that all major projects really must encompass these four ideas of safety, connectivity, mobility, and accessibility. And what better way to meet all of those goals here, and other than roundabouts here. So we'll go through the process here. If you want to, next slide, Andrew. And really, I think most of us on this call understand why roundabouts are so important, and it's really because they're a proven safety countermeasure. They're a documented countermeasure that reduces crashes, reduces serious injuries and deaths. You can see the statistics there, but essentially what we're looking at here is it reduces crashes of all types. Promotes lower speeds and traffic calming, reduces conflict points versus a traditional intersection, whether it be stop controlled or signalized as well. And really, this kind of exactly ties into what Doug Tomlinson was talking about early on in our HSIP, and where we can incorporate areas and improve safety at some of our intersections that we're failing here, and what better way to do that, and potentially roundabouts. So that was kind of our thinking of going into this project of identifying locations where we think roundabouts could work. Next slide. And again here, really the goal of the project was to identify high potential locations for modern roundabouts. We identified quite a few locations. Again, focusing on safety, accessibility, mobility, and connectivity. We wanted to make sure that any roundabout incorporated pedestrian accommodations, We developed a minimum of 6 concepts, which will show throughout the presentation here. But again, really setting ourselves up here as the MPO to be informed when we do receive funding applications, or to go after funding sources such as HSIP or other federal fundings that come down the pipeline here. So with that being said, I will turn it over to Andrew, and he will walk us through sort of the process that we went through and some of the goals and some of the outcomes of the study. So Andrew, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And before I go to the next slide, I just want to add that, while the screening does focus heavily on safety and crashes and whatnot, the purpose of the study was to identify high potential roundabout locations. So there are other reasons to select a roundabout other than safety, but we did focus primarily on safety. That said, this is a brief overview of our entire study, as well as a rough agenda for the presentation. So, this started in July of last year and wrapped up in March of 2022. So a lot of this information is still hot off the presses. But you can see we focused on collecting our data, filtering it through our database, and creating that GIS analysis, as well as going through these different screening steps, which we'll go into more detail. So throughout the study, we had a big focus was having a collaborative process internally, as well with our steering committee, which included SBC, Urban, and our sub-consultants, as well as the 3 Penndot engineering districts, county planners, and the city of Pittsburgh. And it was really important that at each step of the process that we engage the steering committee to incorporate their feedback and keep us on the right track. But obviously, with so many steering partners, it can be difficult to get all of those folks in the same room. So we developed this study website where people could present, where we could present our intersection locations, allow the steering committee to provide comments at their own leisure, locate it relative to other Penndot projects that might be happening in the region, as well as suggesting their own locations. And so this was the first step and the basis of the study. Roundabouts are a great tool, and so we wanted to use them where they make sense. So like Josh said earlier, roundabouts can significantly reduce the number of crashes, specifically angle and head-on crashes. And so having this focus, we use PennDOT's 2017 Highway Safety Network Screening, which calls back to Doug and his group and the work that Kittleson had done previously to identify intersections and roadway segments that were underperforming. So that said, we started by combining the urban and rural intersections. There's roughly about 1,400 intersections, separating them by county and initially ranking them by angle and head-on crashes. This is a quick snapshot of what that list looks like. It has all the identifying information, and we wanted to screen as many intersections as possible without excluding any potential high potential intersections. So that said, we focused on things like traffic split, intersection ADT, combined angle and head-on crashes, and excess cost. And we'll go into more detail in the coming slides. So that first filter focuses on intersection ADT and really helped us to set upper and lower bounds for roundabouts. Just as a brief reminder, intersection ADT is the total intersection volume, and it allows us, using the diagram on the right, to roughly size out the type of intersection that you're going to need. So you can see if anything between 20 and 25,000 or below, it's probably going to be a single lane roundabout. Above that, you're going to need additional lanes. So we didn't have an upper bound, but this did help us to determine the impacts to the intersection that we might be looking at in the future. That said, we did have a lower bound focused on making sure that there was enough traffic to justify the improvement. So if an intersection wasn't that busy, say there was about 800 vehicles or 1,000 vehicles per day, it wouldn't be sufficient traffic to justify the improvement. We also looked at the split between ADT volumes. So that's our 90-10 split comes from. So 90% is on the main line with 10% on side street. And what we generally found was that these types of intersections were closer to higher priority intersections. So in this case, you can see the red pin intersection mostly serves a residential neighborhood and doesn't connect to the larger network, Whereas this intersection nearby has more crashes. It's a junction of two state routes. And in this case, maybe the blue circled intersection has a higher benefit, and improvements at the red could be done in conjunction to let people use the roundabout for U-turns in the future. So we thought that 90-10 split did make more sense and prioritized quote unquote more deserving intersections. We also looked at excess costs. So this comes up a lot with HSM screenings, and one of our first approaches was to initially sort by excess costs, but we noticed it didn't correlate well with good roundabout candidates. And the reason we found was that high excess cost intersections may be deserving of an improvement, but it didn't correlate well with that improvement being a roundabout. So our initial screening was focused heavily on the combined angle and head-on crashes, which could be correctable by a roundabout. So in summary, we eliminated any intersections that had less than 4 angle and head-on crashes, less than 1,000 vehicles per day, and also intersections that may have needed more than 2 entry lanes, which was a few and far between. And then lastly, intersections that would be incompatible, like the one on the right where there's grade separated, there's intersections of one-way streets, something that didn't make sense from a roundabout perspective. So starting with our initial 1,400 intersections, we brought it down to about 600 and reviewed them individually and noting things such as topography, transit opportunities and connections, adjacent intersection control, as well as constraints by trails and railroads, and then obvious environmental constraints such as gas stations, proximity to streams, parks, etc. And from there, we were able to identify 160 high potential and about 257 potential. And we did put an asterisk next to that potential because what it means is while it's a great intersection candidate for a roundabout, there was some complicating factor that may have made it a little bit more difficult than those high potential intersections. So in summary, we were able to narrow it down to 160. We presented those to the steering committee and discussed, and after discussions we had with them, we're able to reduce it to about 84 intersections. The last part of step 1 was to perform an HSM analysis, highway safety manual, using Penndot's HSM tools. And we did this for 2 reasons. One, it confirmed that the intersection performed as screened. So the HSNS network was from 2017, and we were doing our analysis 4 years later in 2021. And we wanted to make sure that there hadn't been a change in crashes. So some of the intersections we screened have since been converted to 4-way stops. So the crashes were reduced significantly. And some of them, for whatever reason, there were crashes that reduced or crashes that increased. The second reason we wanted to do this was to create a benefit budget. So having intersections where the potential benefit could justify the improvement. So if you didn't have a benefit somewhere between or greater than 1.5 million to 2.5 million, which is ballpark numbers for roundabout improvement these days, the benefit cost ratio would be below 1, so it wouldn't be worth the further analysis. So from that, we were able to reduce those 84 intersections to about 40 intersections. So if the purpose of step 1 was to identify roundabouts where they make sense, roundabout screening step 2 was all about confirming that there wasn't an alternative that made more sense. So we followed Penndot's intersection control evaluation tool and used the stage form to compare a roundabout versus other alternatives. If you're familiar with Penndot's intersection control evaluation, which was developed by Kittleson, these are the default intersection control types. And based off of our previous filters, such as the high traffic split, almost all of the lower intersection alternatives were eliminated just based off of the screening. So usually it came down between a 2-way stop and all-way stop, a signalized control, which are the existing conditions for most of the intersections, and a roundabout. So for the most part, the roundabout kind of floated to the top as the obvious improvement. And the reason it was important to conduct this intersection control evaluation was there are some intersections that kind of slip through the cracks data-wise. I'd say this is more of the exception than the rule, but in this case, you can see that on the left, you have about 12,000 AT and 10,000 on the bottom. And so from the Excel data perspective, this is a great candidate. However, when you look at more detail, you can see that the state route turns from the south leg to the west leg. And it was kind of a confusing traffic control in this one particular case. And what we found is of the 33 total crashes, 20 of them were hit fixed objects for northbound drivers just completely missing the stop sign and driving into the opposite side of the intersection. Those that made it past the stage 1 form, so the 15 remaining intersections, we also looked at from a safety and operations perspective, so comparing alternatives using the crash modification factors, which you might find in the CMF clearinghouse, as well as operations, so using FHWA's CapEx tool and SBC's streetlight data to use the turning movement counts and compare alternatives. From those 40 intersections, we were able to find that the majority, the 32, were still recommended as roundabouts. 4 had traffic signal improvements such as left turn lanes. 1 was a median U-turn, 1 all-way stop, 1 realignment, which was the example I provided earlier, and then 1 was eliminated. That said, those 32 intersections were represented to the steering committee, and from there, 7 were identified to be progressed to concept development. So this is an example of one of those concepts, but it also was accompanied by a concept report, which includes about a 10% design, desktop environmental screening, traffic analysis, cost estimate, Hsm analysis, and then lastly, a benefit cost analysis. But in conclusion, this was a great collaborative process with the steering committee and the study team. We were able to identify 160 high potential intersections and develop 7 of those to concept reports. And I can guess most importantly, we were able to meet PennDOT's HSIP requirements, being addressing a strategic highway safety priority, being intersection safety, being identified through a data-driven process, which was this process, and contribute to a reduction in fatality and serious injuries. With that, I'll say thank you and turn it back over to Josh.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Josh. This is Sarah Wolford. I just have a question based on that last illustration. It was the Highland Gas Union Road. Yeah, this one. And I mean, I lived in this general area. I've used that intersection many, many times. That downward to the left connection actually connects pretty quickly to an I-279 interchange. So there is a high volume of traffic. But my question is actually, prior to the time when all those houses in the upper right were developed, that was a golf course, and traffic volumes were significantly lower. Obviously, the arrival of significant additional residents and traffic generated the need for this roundabout concept, which I support. But where do we get this into the planning stage where this might be the sort of transportation improvement that is required of developers? And is that a question that is relevant to us, or is that more of a planning / economic development or whatever discussion?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. The only things I know about are requiring developers to put traffic signals in. Now I know they can do other sorts of improvements. Now, obviously, the township and PennDOT at that time would have had to work with the developer, and I don't know where those main entrances and exits come from. Obviously, a traffic impact study would have had to have been done as well. So that would be the process, normally, the traffic impact study to address any of those concerns at the intersection.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that going forward, roundabouts are considered part of that toolbox.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh, for the opportunity.
So I'll just go back and share our agenda here. We just have a couple quick items here before we conclude our meeting. Agenda item number 6 here. Just wanted to give a quick update on some of the activities going on here in our section here at SPC. First, I'll turn it over to Evan Schoss, transportation planner with us within the operations and safety section. So, Evan, do you just want to give us a quick update on where we're at with the CMP survey update?
Sure thing. Thank you, Josh. So we're currently almost done with the 10 county SPC surveys. We are on Butler County, which is the last and most significant before we hit Allegheny County in the city of Pittsburgh. And that had just rolled out. I want to say it was on the 17th of June, maybe. The survey hit Facebook. It's posted on our SPC Facebook page. So residents of Butler County can provide feedback through that. And in the next few weeks here, we should have the Allegheny County, or a portion, deciding on how we want to split it up for Allegheny County. And excuse me, shortly after that, we should have the 2021 updates to the CMP network for the 10 county region updated to our webpage. So a couple things coming here in short order, so keep your eyes peeled for that stuff, and we'll update you in the next meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. Thanks to our county partners for help spreading the word there and providing us feedback as well. We appreciate it. I just want to give a quick update on where we're at here with our regional traffic signal program. Many of you know we are in our 4th cycle here with our regional traffic signal program. We are currently working with Penndot District 12 and 2 municipalities of North Huntington and Penn Township. Got an update from our contractor this morning that we are still waiting for some of our supplies to come in, which is the norm these days with the supply chain issues and so on. But we should be in the construction phase with those 2 municipalities, North Huntington on State Route 30, and then Penn Township as well. We should be, like I said, the construction phase here probably pretty soon here, hopefully the next couple months. We're also working with Penndot District 10. We have 4 different projects. We have 3 projects in Cranberry Township, 1 on Rochester Road, 1 on State Route 19, and 1 on State Route 228. And last but not least, we have a project that encompasses 2 traffic signals on 422 in Worthington Borough and West Franklin Township up in Armstrong County. We are actually should be opening bids here soon. I forgot what we went out to bid, but nonetheless, we should be opening our bids here pretty soon. Last but not least, we're working with 6 different communities in Penndot District 11. We're working with Baden Borough on State Street. We're working with Plum Borough on State Route 286. City of Newcastle. We're also working with Scott, Collier, Heidelberg on State Route 50. Bellevue Borough, and then also last but not least, North Fayette and Robinson Township. And we are right now, we're in the middle of the design phase for that, for the majority of the projects, and still in PE phase with North Fayette and Robinson Township. We hope to have a let date. I think our let date's at the end of the year, and then get into construction and so on and so forth the following 2023 into 2024. So with that, I just also wanted to let everyone know we've also gone through quite a big reorganization here at SPC. Our section used to be Dominic DeAndrea, myself, and Evan Schoss. With reorganization, we have gained Mr. Chris Jaros, who was a former GIS analyst within our company, has been relocated over to us. So I just wanted to welcome him to our section. You'll probably be seeing him around. He's going to be focusing on our regional traffic signal program, ITS, and supporting all of our various initiatives here. So Chris, I just wanted to turn it over to you, and if you want to say anything.
Yeah, sure. Let me turn the camera on here so everyone can see me. Hi, first Jarvis. Josh pretty much stole all the thunder. Former GIS analyst, now transportation planner here. So, yeah, you'll be seeing me at these meetings, and call me or email me if we need anything. So, thanks.
Thanks, Chris. So with that being said, that really concludes the majority of our agenda. I just wanted to open up the floor to anyone. If anyone had any comments, questions, concerns, or additional items for discussion, we can open up the floor now to anyone on the call. All right, hearing none, I just wanted to quickly have some shameless plugs here for a few other SPC meetings. Tentatively, our next Operations and Safety Forum is scheduled for October 20th. At 10 a.m. It'll be virtual, similar to what we did today. Also wanted to mention a couple other meetings. August 11th at 10 a.m. is our regional TDM partners meeting. If you'd like to be on that mailing list, please contact Anthony Hickton. Also, another shameless plug for another SPC meeting, September 6th at 10 a.m. our Active Transportation Forum. Leanne Cheney is the contact for that. So with that being said, we appreciate everyone's time. Thank you to all of our presenters this morning, Doug, Bob, Dale, Anil, and Andrew. Thank you very much for your time and efforts. We greatly appreciate it. So thank you all. Please look forward. I'm going to get confirmation from all of our presenters that it's okay to share their slides, and look forward to that over the next couple of days. So with that, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.